Hey there, good evening. Nice to see you. It's time for the Bronx Buzz. This is BronxNet's program where we talk to reporters, writers, editors, journalists, people who put stuff out so you can kind of get a little insight into what's going on in our beautiful borough of the Bronx. Second segment, we've got a long standing Bronx artist who we are going to talk to. She's got a very interesting display. That she has created. So, we're going to do that in our second segment. But in the first segment, we're going to say hello to Dean Moses, who is with AM New York and the Bronx Times. Dean is outdoors. Nice to see you, Dean.
Thank you so much for having me.
The reason that he's outdoors is because I guess you're downtown now. You're covering a
Yes,
big story. You
yes,
may as well tell us about that.
yes. So it's P Diddy's in court today after being arrested by the feds last night. So he's a lot of press down here. So I'll just come across the street, take the time to speak to you guys while waiting for him to maybe possibly emerge if he's not detained.
Well, who knows what's going to happen? Um, I mentioned to you because I was not aware of it until I spoke to you that you are clearly your accent is not a Bronx accent. So, how'd you get here? What brought you here? And a little bit of background so people could know who you are.
Well, thank you. So currently I'm the breaking news editor at AM New York Metro, and originally I'm from England, Brighton, England, and I actually came 13 years ago, I think now. Actually, the reason I came to America was to get married. I actually met my wife online, and I came to get married. And since then, I started doing primarily photography, and then I sort of got into doing also the writing, and it sort of just spiraled out from there. And now I'm doing both photography and writing every day, multiple stories a day. So,
Well, that's amazing. The last question on this, and then we do
no,
want to get
please.
to some topical issues. What is it that motivates you about doing this? And now I realize you don't only cover the Bronx. I mean, the Bronx Times is where AM New York's material, gets published. But what motivates you about doing it?
Well, one thing in the photography aspect, I feel like there's a lot of art. There's art, an art overlay there, which I really love a lot, and just being able to tell stories. And honestly, sometimes being able to help people. I've had the fortunate ability through some of my stories. I do some work with homeless individuals, and they've expressed to me that some of my stories have been able to help them find at least temporary shelter. So that being able to help people, it's a big deal.
Yeah, and so you've really been able to help people, and along with being able to do your own creativity. Well, this leads right into the first story we want to talk about. You wrote a piece called "Over and Out: Bronx Police Radio Silenced and Latest Encryption Rollout," as local journalists argue it will hamper New York City crime reporting. This comes on the heels of some journalists being banned from one police plaza. As a journalist, what is your concern about the encryption of police radios?
Well, also just a piggyback off that, I'm actually also working One Piece Plaza occasionally.
Oh,
I'm
that's
also in the
interesting.
shack, so I've seen firsthand that there's definitely some rising tensions as of late. But biggest concern is just public knowledge. I mean, not only just for myself. Sometimes fellow journalists will be like, this is going to affect my job, me personally. But I think the important thing is for people to know it's not going to just affect me doing my job. It's also going to affect the knowledge everybody has. Citizen app, which thousands and thousands of people in New York uses, that often they are aware of stuff through the police radios. So once these channels become encrypted, with what recently happened in the Bronx, they're not going to be notified. So if there's a shooter or a crime in your neighborhood, you might not be aware. Or if there's a police activity in your neighborhood, you may not know what it is. You be able to go quickly online. Journalists will say, "Oh, this is what's happening," but we might not know. So you'll see a police tape, and you're like, "Oh, is somebody hurt? Is it a bomb threat? Is it an active shooter?" You might just not know because of that.
Is this a general thing? I mean, I've been covering the Bronx for a long time, never had a police radio. Do you think people privately do that, and that is an actual factor that the general public would not know what's going on? Or is it more that, in other words, when, God forbid, something happens, there's a fire, you folks, the journalists, can get out there and cover it right away because you know that it's happening? Or is there really a general public aspect to this?
Well, I think the general public aspect comes in regards to finding out through us, the media, especially now with social media, journalists put things out instantaneously, and on top of that, like I said, mentioned Citizen app. There's other apps that people use to know where their loved ones are. So and surrounding their neighborhoods, so they won't know through Citizen app if that's happened. So it will affect them there. And when it comes to people using the radio, that's why the police say they want to go encrypted, because they don't want the general public to listen to radio out of concern for their officers. Now, I do think that is a valid point.
Yes.
We don't want officers to be in any way, shape, or form, in any danger. However, I do think there's some kind of aspect where there could be a deal be made where journalists or certain individuals do have access to the radios.
Your reporting said the 46, 47, 48, 49, 50th, and 52nd precincts. Interesting, only the North Bronx precincts had it. I can't even begin to strategize why that might be. Maybe the others are going to be done in a little while. I mean, I can't measure that. So do you think, and you've been out there in the streets for enough time to know, do you think that there is a security risk to police officers because the radios are out there? And then I don't know if we would know, but have there been compromises to that security that has caused this? Or, as many people suspect, is this really, the mayor and, of course, the former police commissioner backing off and saying, you know what, we'd rather just do our business and not have review?
So I've spoken to police sources and other journalists, and they seem to feel that the wide consensus is this is just kind of a way to maybe control the narrative a little bit, maybe not have so many negative news articles about crime pop up. However, they do claim, the NYPD does claim that they have found people using police radios maybe in robbery patterns. They say during protests, they hear people using police radios to find out what their plan is. So this is something they claim to be an issue. I don't think it is. I'm not, I don't disagree with that, but I don't think it's as widespread as they tend to make.
I'm curious, and I have no knowledge of this, and I don't know if you know either. Are other municipalities backing off on police radio availability? Or is this really just like, well, New York, we're trying this now?
Well, as I understand, there are other states who have done this. I believe some states have done some kind of compromise where there's been a 10-minute delay. So
That's interesting.
People can listen to it, but maybe they're 10, 15 minutes behind, which something has been, the topic has been broached here, but as of yet, we haven't had any concrete information on that. But as of right now, I believe this is something the NYPD says they have seen done elsewhere, and they're trying to follow up in the same regard.
According to your reporting, the Legal Aid Society told you that they believe this is another step by the Adams administration to sever the need for police accountability and transparency. I mean, that's what they say. I guess we'll wait and see. Is there going to be pushback on this, or this is the way it is, and let's see how it plays out?
Well, there's definitely been pushback on this from many people in the journalism world. Like I mentioned before, there was a hearing a few months ago. A CEO from Citizen App spoke. There's been other journalists like Todd Mazel, who has been really put in the forefront on this, who've been really trying to fight this. But as of right now, the NYPD has been very reluctant to have an open dialogue we'd like to see. So I am hopeful that there will be some kind of understanding, because I do believe this is a partnership the NYPD and journalists have at the end of the day. So I'm hopeful, but as of yet, it's we haven't had much talk on this.
Well, we of course will stay on it, and it will be interesting. There's a new police commissioner. Whether he has free reign, I don't really know. The other story I wanted to talk about with you that you wrote on is the MTA ramping up bus fare evasion crackdowns, and New Yorkers are not thrilled with it. Now, I have to tell you, I've been on a bus and I've seen what we're looking at here is that people, slide through the back door, and then, and you kind of look at them and say, well, I swiped my card. You didn't do the same. If they're cracking down on people breaking the law and, they're not heavy-handed about it, is there an issue here, or is this listen, we decided to tighten up. I mean, I could understand many riders resentful of people who are riding for free and slipping through the turnstiles and all that when we got to pay. I mean, I don't know. Am I wrong about this?
Well, no, I think the key word you said was heavy-handed. I mean, I've had during that reporting, I've had many people say the same thing you did. I'm sick of people not paying, and some people think it's a good thing. But there's others whose main concern to me was that they are slowing the bus routes down. They're stopping the buses. People are trying to get somewhere. They're going on board.
Oh,
They're checking everybody individually. Have you paid? Have you paid? Have you paid?
is that how? Wait a minute. Is that how they're doing it? They're checking people individually rather
Well,
than
they
catching
what
them in the act.
Yeah, so what they do is the bus pulls into to a stop. Some individuals is called the Eagle Team.
Wow.
They're being accompanied by the NYPD. They go on. They ask people, "Show us your ticket. Show us your ticket." Sometimes if you pay with a debit card, they actually use the device to scan your debit card. People feel that this is slowing down the buses. I've got to get somewhere, so it can take quite a few minutes at a time.
Right. Well, that is certainly legitimate. You did report an incident with a woman who said she was digging in her pockets to find change. The bus driver told her to move along, and the next thing she knows, she's got slapped with a ticket, and it's not nothing. And when you're slapped with that kind of a ticket, it was $100 fine, and et cetera, et cetera. I guess that underscores what you said about the heavy-handedness.
Well, yeah, she was very distraught, and she wasn't the only one to say that. Other people said the bus driver, in an effort to get things moving, told them to come back, and she said while it was riding, she planned on bringing the change up. But an individual who was also in plain clothes, which is what they're doing as well, they have some people who are dressed casually, who actually stopped her because she said she didn't pay. And
Right.
in regards to this too, with the heavy-handedness, with the fare evasion, we also just had on Sunday a police-involved shooting, which involved a fare beater who allegedly had a knife. He was shot with his
Yes,
pen
that's
from
right.
beating the fare. So that's another issue people are having, is
Well,
how forceful our officers are going to be.
yeah, we're almost out of time. Gun arrests in the subway system, according to your reporting, are up 76.5% this year, which they say is to stopping turnstile hoppers. And, but it's the old story of you stop the small crimes, maybe you can get to the big crimes. Listen, Dean Moses, I know you got work to do, and I thank you. I and we in the Bronx thank you so much for taking the time. Next time we'll see you behind a desk in an office. And
Absolutely.
but your writing is just fantastic, and
Yeah,
it's
that means
so
the world.
important to all of us.
Thank you so
Say
much.
hello to Ethan and all our buddies over there at AM New York and the Bronx Times, and we'll see you around town. Good luck in the coverage today. We'll certainly look forward to what you write about.
Thank you so much for having me. Appreciate it.
Great. Okay, we'll take a short break, and then we'll come back, and we'll do that segment I talked about with that artist. Don't go away. Okay, back with you on the Bronx Buzz. And we thank Dean for joining us in our previous segment. But right now, to a friend from a long time, it is Linda Cunningham. She's an artist of significant repute in our borough of the Bronx. So nice to see you, Linda.
Yeah. Well, thank you. That's very nice.
Well, it is, and you're surrounded by your artwork. And just before we get into this very exciting piece that you've put together, just a little bit about your background in art. When did you start making artwork, and just a little bit about that?
I was I think at 7 years old, I decided I was going to be an artist. And
Wow.
it's just, because I love to draw. And so it kind of went on that way. I was just trying to figure out, well, how can you be an artist? And then I got out of college. I just went and got a master's degree immediately because I didn't know how else I could be an artist, and I didn't have that kind of guts of, being quite, it was early enough that, um, I
You just
came into it, when I finally moved to New York.
you
That's
you you just had to express yourself, I think is what you're telling us. You
yeah.
just were driven to say there's something out here and I want to figure out how to communicate.
And how to say it. So I tried all sorts of things, drawing, and then I learned sculpture in grad school, especially some beforehand. And um, yeah, you're figuring out how to survive. So I ended up teaching for a long time.
Yeah, I didn't want to say when you said, I want to figure out how to be an artist, I was going to say something to the effect of, well, then you have basically destined yourself to be poor the
Yes,
rest of your life.
just about,
Just about.
you know,
But if you were teaching, I guess you did it. Do you have a favorite medium or a favorite type of work, or whatever you're creating at the time is the favorite?
it's actually, I think I really am a sculptor at heart, but that means sculptors draw much more than they paint, and much less a color sense than I am. I'm often working in earth colors and kind of a low palette, but I have worked in all media. And behind me, you can see a big painting on one side. Um, that I, got very interested again in painting because of the hurricanes that we started to experience. And somehow I wanted to record the kind of force that those winds and waves and everything are. And now, I mean, practically everybody, all artists are all trying to deal with the environment if they're not trying to deal with their own personal
Right.
issues.
No.
And so, I actually moving on, I always did a lot of sculpture. And
Do you create every day? Do you wake up in the morning and say, well, what am I doing today?
oh,
Or
I
not?
wish, I wish.
Oh,
Life
okay.
has many, many more demands than that. Don't
All
I
right.
wish?
Yeah.
I actually did a great deal last year. I had a number of one-person exhibitions, and it built up to outdoor art exhibits. And so at that time, you're not making new art. You're figuring out how all the arrangements. I mean, some of
Right.
the
Sure.
sculpture I've done involved renting trucks all the time. I learned how to
So,
drive.
what I find funny about that is because here you are and you learn about the materials and paint, and here you are renting trucks as part of your
Oh, yeah.
experience.
Oh,
Uh,
yes.
So,
I just,
so this brings us to divisions, which is the the sculpture, the project that you worked on. And so tell us what it was. Now, let's see. It was originally located, we have pictures of it being created and all that. Originally located across from the United Nations in the late 90s. What was it? What is it? And then we'll talk about where it's at now.
um, well, I had done a number of large scale sculpture installations, and they always had a theme. And the kinds of themes that I wanted to work with were not the ones that generally were commissioned by, businesses. They don't want to see a memorial that's honoring the survivors of devastating circumstances like wars in front of their buildings. Naturally, they want shiny things that look very positive and up, and that just was not what I was interested in making.
Interesting.
And I started very early on, and there are some of those were long time. One of them now still is cited permanently at Grounds for Sculpture in New Jersey.
Mhm.
It's still it's doing fine, but those were done with cast bronze. And I always had that as a media. Since through my teaching job, I figured out how to get a whole lot of military scrap bronze. We don't think of the military throwing out bronze, but the ships that they
Wow.
decommission all have a lot of bronze parts.
So we have some of the photos. So while you're talking, Anderson, you can run some of these photos. So you then found this material and began to create this work.
In fact, most of my pieces have been done like that. In fact, this is one of the photos taken at the end of trying to renovate the materials that were used in this installation. And I created these wood beams, and they were walls from these wood beams. They came out of a building in Lower Manhattan that
Wow.
they were throwing out. This is, yes, a photo of the installation.
Right.
And as it looks now in Rome, New York,
Which is where it was moved. Keep going, Anderson, with more of the pictures. I want to show some of the process of taking it up there.
Yes.
Talk
yes.
about renting trucks.
Well, I didn't drive that one. That one came from Ohio, but another artist. Yeah, that's the people at Rome who run this sculpture park on a former military base. So they have tons of equipment that they use, and that's me cleaning the beams that had been left in storage outside, and so they were dirty, and this took off all whatever old rust had accumulated, but they were painted originally with automotive paint, and so that automotive paint largely held, and that's me putting a coat of a transparent sealer over the paint on the steel beams. Those steel beams also came from a demolition site. And how did I acquire them? There they are installing these sculptures.
How did you acquire them?
I happened to be at a conference in Washington, D.C. At the
Right.
time I was teaching in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. And I went back to Lancaster. I saw those beams lying around, and that were just from the steel skeleton of a building they tore down. And I rented a truck, and a couple of young guys who were students loved having a chance to drive that truck to Washington, D.C. And, we gave the guys on the site $50, and they said, "Lady, which one do you want?"
Well,
they
it is really a definition of an artist and an artist's mind that you looked at this and said, they're ready to toss it to the trash, and you're like, wait, this is something. Talk about it being on display at the United Nations. I think there is a photograph of the United Nations.
Well, I spent a year in Germany, and I became thoroughly familiar with the tragedies for all humans that war creates. And so when I saw those beams, they looked like a war ruin to me, but they were horizontal, and I wanted to stand them up and give them a new life and have a chance for Americans to look at and think about what that kind of war means, because we have not had 20th century wars on our
but not other than that moment of 9/11, of course, and that's where people I think would relate to that. And I appreciated what you said at the beginning, that this is not what people want in front of their houses because they want something beautiful, but quite appropriate in front of the United Nations building, of course.
Yes. And then the last decision I made was that it did need some text to give people an idea of how I was thinking. And it's a fairly abstract text that was put on that signage, but the same thing is written on every one of 6 of signs that are on the side of those wooden walls. Um,
And then why did it end up in Rome, New York? Like, how did it, why Rome, New
that is,
York, for
yes,
example?
because it was quite a cycle since then. The college, Wright State University, agreed to take it when it had to be moved from the site in front of the UN. Actually, the community board would have been willing to extend it. They already extended it 6 months, and they would have extended again. I think they understood what this public art was about, but the signs were translated in the 6 languages, official
Right.
languages.
And so we've got a timely quotation from philosopher Emmanuel Levinas. Each plaque displays a translation in one of the 6 official languages of the United Nations. And the quote equates being human with acting humanely. We've got one photograph here of the actual of what it looks like in Rome, New York. So if we could show that, there it is. And now this is where it's going to stay. This is the permanent location for it.
Yes, and in that photo, only one of the walls or 2 of the walls have been installed, and another photo that you have, it shows the other walls that we were working on the repairing of those walls over a period of a week and a half.
If
Basically.
I remember my geography of Rome, New York, it's up Route 17, right? Is that where we're going?
It's sort of midway between Buffalo and Albany.
Oh, so it's what is that, 80, 81 or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Anyway, and how do you find it when you get to Rome, New York?
There are huge signs to this Griffiths Industry Park.
Okay, that's right. The Griffith International Sculpture Garden and Nature Trail. I got that.
Right.
So that's what we're looking for when we go up there.
And when you first try to drive into that city, you can't help but see the
find
sign.
it. Great. Okay.
And
Listen, Linda, we're out of time. I'm applauding my longtime friend and a longtime artist. This to me is the best of the Bronx, sharing things about humanness, sharing things about living together, acting humanely, and doing it through art so we can all appreciate it and enjoy it. And you did it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Great. And listen, do you have something next? Are you ready to do something next?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
You'll let us know what it is, and we'll follow you down the road. Thank you so much. Hey, folks, that will do it for the Bronx Buzz. We thank Dean for joining us in our first segment. Of course, we thank Linda for all the years of great work. And of course, let's all get up to Rome, New York, and appreciate her work in person. And that will do it. If the curtain don't fall and the creek don't rise, yes, we'll be back next week.